Honey, the lawyer finally came through. He managed to release the money from your father's inheritance. $60,000. I shared the news happily with my daughter Jessica that Thursday afternoon, clutching the manila envelope that my lawyer, David, had handed me earlier that morning. My hands were trembling, not from fear, but from an excitement I hadn't felt in years. $60,000. It was the money my late husband had tucked away, invested in a life insurance policy I didn't even know existed. David explained that it had been months of red tape, paperwork, and endless waiting in gray offices where time seemed to stand still. But finally, after nearly a year of administrative hoops, the funds were released. It was mine. It was ours. I thought about Jessica, about how this amount could help her, how maybe we could do something together, perhaps take a trip, like we had always dreamed of when she was a little girl. Jessica was sitting on the sofa in my small living room, scrolling through her phone with that absent expression she always wears when she is at my house. She was wearing a cream-colored blouse and black slacks, her hair pulled back in a perfect ponytail. Always so put together, always so flawless. When I broke the news, her face changed, her eyes went wide, and her mouth parted slightly. For a second, I thought I saw genuine joy. "Mom," she repeated. $60,000. "Yes, sweetie," I replied. "It is your father's inheritance." It finally arrived. I stepped closer to her, wanting to hug her, wanting to share that moment as mother and daughter. But Jessica had already grabbed her phone. She dialed quickly, her nervous fingers flying across the screen. I heard the ringback tone. Once, twice. "Honey?" she said when Mark picked up on the other end. Her voice sounded strange, rushed, almost anxious. "Come over to my mom's house. Quick." There was a pause. "I need you to come right now. My mom got a lot of money. She can pay for our trip." Silence on the other end. Mark said something I couldn't quite catch. Jessica insisted. "Yes, $60,000. Come over now." She hung up. She looked at me with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Great news, Mom," she said. "Mark is on his way. He wants to say hello." I nodded, although something inside me shifted uncomfortably. "She can pay for our trip." Those words hung in the thick air of the living room. She hadn't asked me how I felt. She hadn't asked what I planned to do with the money. She hadn't hugged me. She had only called her husband. The minutes that followed were strange. Jessica paced back and forth across the living room, looking out the window, sitting back down, standing up again. I brewed some coffee in the kitchen, as I always do when I have company. The smell of fresh coffee filled the house. I set the mugs on the table. 3 mugs, because Mark was coming. I put out some cookies I had bought the day before at the grocery store. Everything so normal, everything so routine. But there was something in the air, something heavy I couldn't quite identify. I heard Mark's car pull into the driveway, the engine cut off. The car door slammed shut. Hurried footsteps on the front walk. Jessica ran to the door before he could even knock. She threw it open. And there was Mark, in his wrinkled gray button-down, hair messy, eyes wide. He was clutching his car keys in his right hand. Jessica smiled at him. "It is here," she told him. "My mom has the money." Mark took a step forward. His eyes sought mine, sitting there on the sofa with the manila envelope still in my hands. Our gazes locked for a second. And then something happened that I will never forget. The keys slipped from his hands. They hit the ceramic tile floor with a metallic clatter that echoed through the whole room. Mark froze. His face went pale, completely white, as if he had seen a ghost. He brought his hands to his head and screamed. A stifled, desperate scream that came from the bottom of his chest. "No, no, no." That is what he yelled. Jessica looked at him, confused. "What is wrong with you?" she asked. Mark didn't answer. He just stood there, breathing heavily, hands still on his head, staring at me as if I were the worst of his problems. The coffee went cold on the table. The cookies remained untouched. And I, with my 68 years and my manila envelope in my hands, knew in that instant that something was terribly wrong. That scream wasn't surprise. It wasn't joy. It was panic. It was desperation. It was the sound of someone whose plans had just crumbled. But what plans? What was going on in my son-in-law's head to make him react like that to the news that I, his mother-in-law, had received an inheritance? Jessica bent down to pick up the keys. Mark remained motionless. I watched them both, trying to understand, trying to make sense of this absurd scene playing out in my own living room. I didn't know it yet, but that moment, that precise instant the keys hit the floor, was the moment my life changed forever. It was the moment I stopped being the naive mother who believes everything she is told. The moment I started to see the truth. It took Mark nearly 5 minutes to regain his composure. He sat in the armchair across from me, hands shaking, avoiding my gaze. Jessica brought him water. He drank slowly, as if every sip took an enormous effort. I was still there, the envelope on my lap, watching this bizarre scene. "What happened to you?" I finally asked. Mark looked up. "Nothing, Mom," he replied, his voice raspy. "It is just." The news surprised me. "I am very happy for you." But his eyes said the exact opposite. His eyes were full of fear. Jessica tried to change the subject. "Mom, so what do you plan to do with the money?" she asked with a forced smile. I shrugged. "I don't know yet, honey. I just got it a few hours ago. I need to think. Maybe fix up the house, maybe save some for emergencies. Your father would have wanted me to use it wisely." Jessica nodded, but I noticed her foot tapping the floor impatiently. Mark stayed silent, his gaze lost somewhere on the wall. That night, after they left, I stayed alone in my empty house. The same house where I raised Jessica. The same house where my husband died 3 years ago from a sudden heart attack that didn't even give him time to say goodbye. The walls knew every one of my tears. The old hardwood floors held the echo of Jessica's footsteps when she was a child, running barefoot down the hallways. I remembered how she used to wait for me at the door when I came home from work. I remembered her hugs, her laugh, the way she said "Mommy" in that high-pitched little voice that melted my heart. I worked for 30 years cleaning other people's houses to give her a good education. I got up at 5 in the morning for decades to make her breakfast before school. I sewed her clothes when there wasn't money to buy new ones. I nursed her alone when she had pneumonia at 7 years old, spending 3 nights without sleep, putting cold cloths on her forehead, praying for the fever to break. Her father worked late, too. He was a construction worker, coming home with calloused hands and dust in his hair. But he always brought something for Jessica. A piece of candy, a small toy, a flower he picked by the road. We never had much, but we had love. Or so I thought. Jessica married Mark 5 years ago. I wasn't very sure about that decision. Mark always seemed like an ambitious man, the kind who measures people by what they have, not who they are. But Jessica was in love. Or, so she said. The wedding was simple, in the backyard of a borrowed house. I made the cake. I sewed my own beige dress because I didn't want Jessica spending money on me. On her wedding day, I saw her happy, and that was enough for me. But after the marriage, something changed. The visits became less frequent, the calls shorter. She was always in a hurry, always had something more important to do. I understood, or tried to understand. It is normal, I told myself. She has her own life now. She has her husband, her responsibilities. But it hurt. It hurt every Sunday I spent alone. Every birthday I celebrated with a little candle on a piece of bread because it didn't make sense to bake a cake just for myself. When my husband died, Jessica came to the funeral. She stayed 2 days. Then she went back to her life. I stayed here, in this house full of memories and silence. I learned to cook for one person. I learned to sleep in a bed that suddenly felt enormous and cold. I learned to wake up without having anyone to say good morning to. The neighbors visited me sometimes. They invited me to play cards on Fridays. I went, I smiled, I chatted. But deep down, I always felt that void, that hole that only a daughter can fill. Now, with $60,000 on my nightstand, tucked inside that manila envelope, I thought about everything I could do. I could travel. I always wanted to see the ocean. I have never seen it in person, only in photographs and on TV. I could fix the roof that leaks when it rains. I could buy new clothes, not secondhand like I have always worn. I could help Jessica if she asked me nicely. I could do so many things. But that night, I couldn't stop thinking about Mark's face. about that scream, about those keys hitting the floor. I got out of bed past 2 in the morning. I made chamomile tea, the same kind my mother made for me when I was a girl and couldn't sleep. I sat by the kitchen window, watching the empty street, the lights out in the neighbors' houses. Everything so quiet outside, everything so turbulent inside me. There are things a mother knows without anyone telling her. There are signs the heart recognizes even if the mind refuses to accept them. Jessica didn't ask me how I felt about receiving the money. She didn't ask if I missed her father. She didn't ask if I needed company. She only thought about her trip. And Mark, that man who should have been happy for his mother-in-law, that man who should have celebrated the good news, reacted as if he had been given the worst news of his life. Why? That question drilled into my head all night. Why does a man react with desperation to his mother-in-law's money? What did he have to do with my inheritance? What plans had been ruined by my good fortune? The tea went cold in my hands. The clock struck 3, then 4. I was still there, awake, feeling something break inside me. Something that maybe had been broken for a long time, but I had refused to see. The image of my daughter, my only daughter, the baby I carried in my womb, whom I nursed, whom I protected from the world, now seemed like that of a stranger. A stranger who only called me when she needed something. A stranger who measured my worth in dollars. I went back to bed when the sky began to lighten. I closed my eyes, but I didn't sleep. And in that heavy silence of dawn, I knew that nothing would ever be the same. The following days were strange. Jessica called me more times that week than in the entire previous year. "Mom, how are you? Mom, have you thought about what you are going to do with the money? Mom, we need to talk about something important," always with that sweet voice she hadn't used with me in years. Always with that tone that sounded practiced, as if she were reading a script. I answered cautiously, "I am fine, sweetie. I still haven't decided anything. What do you need?" But she never got straight to the point. She circled the topic, asked questions, tested the waters. On Friday of that week, Jessica and Mark came to visit me without warning. They arrived mid-afternoon, while I was watering the plants in the small garden I have out front. Jessica brought a bag of pastries. Mark wore a more controlled expression than the last time, but he still wouldn't look me in the eye. They came in. They sat in the living room. I served coffee. Everything so cordial, everything so normal on the surface. But I could feel the tension floating in the air, like suspended dust. "Mom," Jessica started after taking a sip of her coffee, "Mark and I have been thinking. And, well, we wanted to talk to you about something." I nodded, waiting. She looked at Mark. He cleared his throat. "Look, Mom," he said finally. "We know you have been through a lot. The passing of Dad, God rest his soul, left you very lonely. This house is very big for one person. And at your age, well, the maintenance must be heavy." I felt something cold run down my back. At my age, as if 68 years made me useless. Jessica picked up where Mark stopped. "What we want to propose, Mom, is that you consider going to a place where they can take better care of you. A beautiful place, with gardens, with people your age, with activities." I paused. "A nursing home?" I asked. "No, no, Mom," Jessica replied quickly. "It is not a nursing home. It is a residence, an assisted living community, a precious place where people live peacefully, without worries. They have nurses, meals included, everything, and that way you could rest. You have worked hard your whole life. You deserve to rest." Mark pulled a brochure out of his backpack. He put it on the table. It was a glossy brochure full of photos of smiling seniors, perfect gardens, spacious rooms with huge windows. "Serenity Meadows," the title read, "A home for your peace of mind." I read the first few lines. Specialized care, 24-hour security, recreational activities. Everything sounded wonderful on paper, too wonderful, too convenient. "And how much does this cost?" I asked. Jessica shifted uncomfortably in her seat. "Well, Mom, it is not that expensive. And with the money you received, you could pay for it easily. In fact, with $60,000, you could be there for several years without worrying." There it was, the money. We always came back to the money. "And my house?" I asked. What would happen to my house? Mark jumped in. We could sell it, Mom, or rent it out. That way you would have additional income. We would take care of everything. You would just have to sign some papers. Sign papers. Sell my house. Go to a residence. All planned out. All thought through. All resolved without really asking me what I wanted. I looked at them both. Jessica had that smile plastered on her face. That smile that didn't move. That wasn't real. Mark played with his hands, anxious. And I felt something I hadn't felt before toward my own daughter. I felt distrust, deep, visceral. Like when you know someone is lying to you, but you can't prove it yet. I don't know, I told them. It is a very big decision. I need to think about it, Jessica insisted. But Mom, it would be the best thing for you. You don't have to be alone anymore. You don't have to worry about anything. Imagine waking up every day and having someone make you breakfast, having someone clean for you, having friends to talk to. It would be perfect. Perfect for whom? I thought. Perfect for me? Or perfect for you? I told them I would think about it, that I needed time. Jessica seemed frustrated, but she nodded. Okay, Mom, but don't take too long. The spots at Serenity Meadows fill up fast. It is a very sought-after place. They left shortly after. They left the brochure on my table. I picked it up when they were gone and read it completely. Every word, every photo, every promise printed on that shiny paper. And then I noticed something. On the last page in small print, there was a paragraph about the costs. Enrollment fee, $5,000. Monthly rent, $2,500. Special care, additional charges. I did the math in my head. $60,000, minus $5,000 for enrollment. That left $55,000. Divided by $2,500 a month, 22 months. Less than 2 years. And then what? What happened when the money ran out? They would send me back home. But wait, if they sold my house, I wouldn't have anywhere to return to. Then what? I would be stuck there forever, depending on Jessica and Mark, depending on their goodwill, depending on them wanting to keep paying. That night I couldn't eat dinner. My stomach was in knots. I sat in the armchair where my husband used to sit and watch the news. I closed my eyes and tried to hear his voice. What would you do? I asked the silence. What would you advise me? But there was no answer. Only the thick silence of this old house, this refuge they now wanted to snatch from me. The next day, Saturday, I decided to walk to my neighbor Barbara's house. Barbara is 65 and has lived alone since her husband left her a decade ago. She and I have known each other for more than 20 years. We used to have coffee together every week, but over time, the visits spaced out. Life gets like that sometimes. People drift apart without a reason, just because days pass and routines change. I knocked on her door. Barbara opened it with a sincere smile. Eleanor, what a surprise. Come in, come in. Her house smelled like cinnamon and fresh coffee. We sat in her small, bright kitchen. I told her everything. The money, Mark's reaction, the proposal for the residence, my doubts, my fears. Barbara listened without interrupting. When I finished, she sighed deeply. Eleanor, she said finally, I don't want to scare you, but something here doesn't sound right. Why the rush? Why do they already have everything researched? Why did Mark react like that when he saw you with the money? I shrugged. I don't know, Barbara. Maybe they just want to help me. Maybe they really think it is the best thing for me. She shook her head. Or maybe they want your money. And your house. Think about it. If you go to that residence, if you sell the house, they control everything. The money, the property, your future. You are completely in their hands. Her words fell on me like stones. Heavy. Painful. True. I didn't want to believe it. I didn't want to accept that my own daughter could be planning something like that. But the facts were there. Mark's reaction, Jessica's insistence, the brochure they already had ready, the papers they wanted me to sign. Everything fit into a plan that didn't include me as the protagonist, but as an obstacle that had to be removed. Barbara took my hand. Eleanor, be careful. Don't sign anything yet. Don't make rash decisions. And if you need help, I am here. I nodded, a lump in my throat. Thank you, Barbara. Thank you for listening to me. I walked back home slowly, feeling the weight of my 68 years in every step. The sky was cloudy. It looked like it was going to rain, and I felt the same. Cloudy, about to burst, but still holding on, still standing. I entered my house. I locked the door. I leaned against it and finally let the tears out. I cried for the daughter I thought I had. I cried for the money that should have been a blessing and was turning into a curse. I cried for myself, for this tired old woman who no longer knew who to trust. But in the midst of those tears, something else began to be born. Something small, but firm. A determination, a certainty. I was not going to let myself be fooled. I was not going to sign anything. I was not going to give up. Not yet. On Monday morning, Jessica appeared at my house again. This time she came alone. She carried a gray folder under her arm, and that smile that was starting to look like a mask to me. "Mom," she said upon entering. "I came so we can talk calmly. Mark is working, so we can chat just you and me, like before." Like before? How ironic. Before, she didn't come to visit me. Before, I was the one calling, and she always had some excuse not to come. But now, with $60,000 in the mix, suddenly I was a priority. We sat at the dining room table. Jessica opened the folder and took out several papers. I recognized some legal documents. Others looked like forms. There was one with the Serenity Meadows letterhead. "Mom, look," she started saying as she organized the papers in front of me. I already made some inquiries. I went personally to the residence and spoke with the director. It is a beautiful place. Mom, really? They have a lovely garden with fountains. The rooms have their own TV, and they organize trips every week. Imagine, you could go to the park, to the movies, to church, everything organized, without you having to worry about a thing. She picked up one of the papers. "This is the admission contract. We just need your signature here and here and here." She pointed to 3 spaces marked with red X's. "And this other paper is to authorize the sale of the house. Or if you prefer, we can rent it. But it would be easier to sell it, Mom. That way you would have the money available and wouldn't have to worry about tenants or maintenance problems." I stared at her. "And who would manage that money, Jessica? Who would handle the sale?" She smiled with that artificial sweetness. "We would. Mom, Mark and I. That is what family is for. To take care of you. So you don't have to deal with lawyers or complicated paperwork. You just sign, and we take care of everything." I felt a chill. Sign, and they would take care of everything. How convenient, how suspiciously convenient. I took the papers and started reading them. Jessica got nervous. "You don't have to read them all now, Mom. It is a lot of pages. I already reviewed them. Everything is in order." But I kept reading. Slowly. Word for word. And there it was. In the Serenity Meadows contract, there was a clause stating that the resident had to pay the first 6 months in advance, $15,000, and the enrollment of $5,000, $20,000 before even entering. And in the document for the sale of the house, there was a section authorizing Jessica as the legal representative with full power over the transaction. Full power. Those words hit me like a punch to the stomach. "Jessica," I said, looking up, "this says you would have total control over the sale of my house. That you could sell it without consulting me. That you could handle the money however you wanted." She rushed to explain. "Yes, Mom, but it is just to make things easier for you, so you don't have to be going to sign papers all the time. It is normal in these cases. Lots of people do it this way." "It is not normal," I replied. "Normal would be for me to be present at every step. Normal would be for you to consult me on every decision." Jessica changed tactics. Her voice became softer, sadder. "Mom, I thought you trusted me. I am your daughter. All I want is your well-being. Look at how you live here, alone, in this big house. What happens if you fall and no one is here to help you? What happens if you get sick in the night and can't call anyone? At Serenity Meadows, you would have help all the time. You would be safe. You would be protected." Her words sounded reasonable. But there was something in her tone that didn't fit. Something desperate, something urgent. "I am not going to sign anything today," I told her finally. I need time to think about it, to consult with someone else, maybe with a lawyer. Jessica's face hardened for a second. Just a second. Then the smile returned. A lawyer? Mom, why do you need a lawyer? That is only going to cost you money. I already reviewed everything. It is perfect. But I insisted. I prefer to be sure, Jessica. It is my house. It is my money. These are very big decisions. I need to be completely sure. A heavy silence fell. Jessica gathered the papers and put them back in the folder. Her movements were abrupt now, without the delicacy from before. Fine, Mom, she said with a tense voice. Think about it, but don't take too long. Like I told you, spots fill up fast. And besides, the sooner you move, the sooner you can start enjoying your new life. She stood up. I have to go. Mark is waiting for me. See you soon. She left without hugging me, without kissing my cheek, without looking back. I stayed seated at that table for a long time after Jessica left. The papers were gone, but their presence continued to float in the air. Full power. Immediate sale. Sign here. All designed so I would hand over control of my life without realizing it. I got up and went to my bedroom. I took the manila envelope out from under the mattress, where I had hidden it. The $60,000 were still there, in a check I hadn't cashed yet. A check that represented all my future security, all my freedom. That afternoon I called David, the lawyer. I explained the situation. He listened in silence and then sighed. Eleanor, he told me, be very careful. What you are describing sounds like an attempt to appropriate your assets. If you sign those documents, especially the one giving full power to your daughter, you would lose control of everything. Your house, your money, your decisions. Everything would remain in her hands. He recommended I not sign anything without him reviewing it first. He also recommended that I cash the check and put the money in an account in my name. Only in my name. The next day, I went to the bank. I cashed the check. I opened a new account, an account that only I could manage. The bank teller explained how it worked, how I could make withdrawals, how I could check my balance. He gave me a debit card. It was the first time in my life I had a bank account that was just mine. It had always been my husband's account, where I could only take out money for household expenses. But this was mine, completely mine. When I walked out of the bank, I felt something strange, a mix of relief and fear. Relief because the money was now safe. Fear because I knew that when Jessica found out, things would get difficult. I didn't tell anyone I had cashed the check. I kept the card in my wallet, tucked behind some old photos. And I waited. I waited to see what Jessica and Mark's next move would be. I didn't have to wait long. On Thursday, Jessica called me. Mom, have you thought about what we discussed? Have you made a decision? I told her I was still thinking, that I needed more time. She sighed with impatience. Mom, I don't understand why you are taking so long. It is an incredible opportunity. Most people would be happy to have a place like Serenity Meadows waiting for them. I replied that it was an important decision and I wasn't going to rush. There was a tense silence on the other end. Then Jessica said something that froze my blood. You know what, Mom? Mark and I were talking, and we think maybe you need help making this decision. At your age, sometimes it is hard to see things clearly. Maybe we should go together to have a doctor evaluate you, to make sure you are okay, that you can make decisions for yourself. I went mute. A doctor. To evaluate me. To determine if I was capable of deciding my own life. Jessica, I said with a trembling voice, I am perfectly fine. I don't need any doctor to evaluate me. She insisted. It is just a precaution, Mom. For your own good. We love you and want to ensure you are making the best decisions. I hung up. I couldn't keep listening. My hands were shaking. My whole body was shaking. Now they wanted to declare me incompetent. They wanted to take away even my right to decide. And then I understood. I understood everything. This had never been about my well-being. It had never been about taking care of me. This was about the money, about the house, about controlling everything I had. I sat on the kitchen floor and cried. I cried like I hadn't cried since my husband's death. But this time I wasn't crying from loneliness. I was crying from betrayal, From the pain of knowing that my own daughter, the child I carried in my womb, saw me as an obstacle, as something that had to be removed to get what they wanted. I cried until I had no tears left, and when I got up from the floor, something had changed in me. I was no longer the naive mother who believed in everything. I was no longer the silent victim. Now I was a woman who knew the truth and who was going to do something about it. On Friday afternoon, while I was watering the plants in the garden, I heard a car park in front of my house. It wasn't Jessica's car. It was one I didn't recognize. A small, white car with some dents in the door. Barbara got out of the car. "Eleanor," she called out as she walked toward me with hurried steps. "I need to talk to you. It is urgent." I let her in. She looked agitated, nervous. Her hands trembled slightly as she sat on the sofa. "Barbara, what is wrong?" I asked her. She took a deep breath before speaking. "Eleanor, I work part-time at the county clerk's office. You know that. I handle records, file documents, that sort of thing." I nodded. "Yes, I know," she continued. "Yesterday, while I was organizing some new filings, I saw something that caught my attention. A power of attorney document. A power of attorney in your name." I leaned forward. "What?" "I haven't signed any power of attorney." Barbara shook her head. "I know. That is why I got worried. I pulled the document and reviewed it. Eleanor, the signature isn't yours. I know your signature. This one is different. Someone forged it. I felt the floor move beneath me. They forged my signature." "Who? What for?" Barbara pulled a folded paper from her purse. "I made a copy. I know I shouldn't have. I could get in trouble. But you are my friend. And after everything you did to help me when I lost everything, I couldn't stay silent." She handed me the paper. I unfolded it with shaking hands. It was a full power of attorney. Total legal authority. Granted to Jessica Miller. Dated 2 weeks ago. 2 weeks. Just after I received the inheritance. I kept reading. The document gave Jessica total power over my bank accounts, my properties, my medical decisions, my finances, everything. It was as if I had ceased to exist as an independent person and Jessica was now my owner. And at the bottom, a signature. A signature that was supposed to be mine, but that I had never written. "Barbara," I whispered. "This means that." She finished my sentence. "It means that, legally, Jessica can sell your house without your permission. She can access your accounts. She can commit you to any facility she decides. She can do whatever she wants with you and your things." I brought my hands to my mouth to stifle a scream. How is this possible? How can they do something like this? Barbara moved closer and took my hands. "Eleanor, this is fraud. It is a very serious crime. But we need to act fast. If Jessica tries to use this document before we challenge it, things are going to get very complicated. You need to go to the police. You need to report this. And you need a lawyer. A good lawyer." I looked at her with eyes full of tears. "Barbara, she is my daughter. How am I going to report my own daughter?" Barbara squeezed my hands tight. "Eleanor, your daughter is stealing from you. She is deceiving you. She forged your signature. She wants to take everything you have. This isn't love, Eleanor. This is abuse. It is a crime. And if you don't do something now, you are going to lose everything. Your house, your money, your freedom, everything. You are going to end up locked in a place where you don't want to be, while she and that husband of hers enjoy what belongs to you. Is that what you want?" I shook my head. Tears fell down my cheeks uncontrollably. "No, I don't want that." "Then you have to be strong," Barbara said. "I know it hurts. I know she is your daughter. But she made her decision. She decided to betray you. Now you have to decide if you are going to defend yourself or if you are going to let yourself be destroyed." I remained silent for long minutes. I thought about Jessica, about the little girl she was, about the nights I spent awake taking care of her when she was sick, about the sacrifices I made, about all the love I gave her. And then I thought about the woman she had become, about her coldness, about her urgency to get rid of me, about those papers she wanted me to sign, about that fake power of attorney. "You are right," I said finally. "I need to defend myself." Barbara smiled sadly. That is my Eleanor, the strong woman I know. Now, listen to me closely. I am going to help you, but we need to be smart. You can't confront Jessica yet. If she realizes you know, she might speed up her plans. She might try to commit you on an emergency basis using that fake document. We have to gather more evidence. We have to build a solid case. And then, when we have everything ready, we act. She explained the plan. First, I would go with David, the lawyer, to report the forgery. He would start the legal process to invalidate the power of attorney. Second, we needed to record conversations. Get evidence of Jessica and Mark's intentions. Third, check if there were more fake documents. Maybe they had already tried to sell the house. Maybe they had already moved money I didn't know I had. Barbara knew people at the registrar, at the tax assessors, at the bank. She could help me investigate. We spent that whole afternoon planning. Barbara made calls. She spoke with people who owed her favors. I called David and explained the situation. He was alarmed. Eleanor, this is very serious. Come to my office tomorrow first thing. Bring the document. We are going to initiate legal action immediately. We are also going to put an alert on the property title so no one can sell your house without you being present and authorizing it personally. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat in the living room, with all the lights off, watching the shadows the moon drew on the walls. I thought about my life, about how I had reached this point, 68 years old, widowed, betrayed by my own daughter. But I also thought about how I wasn't completely alone. Barbara was with me. David was willing to help me. And I still had strength. I still had clarity. I could still fight. On Saturday morning, I went to David's office. I showed him the copy of the document. He reviewed it carefully, with a magnifying glass even, comparing the fake signature with my real signature on my ID. This is clearly a forgery, he said. The slant of the letters is different, the pen pressure too. This was done by someone who tried to copy your signature but didn't manage it perfectly. We are going to report this to the district attorney, and we are going to request injunctions to protect your assets. David had me sign several documents. Real documents this time, with my true signature, where I revoked any power I had supposedly granted, where I made it clear that I was the only person authorized to make decisions about my life and my assets. He also drafted a letter directed to Serenity Meadows, informing them that any contract in my name that didn't have my notarized signature was fraudulent and that they should not accept any payment or reservation without my physical presence. I left that office feeling a little safer, but I knew the hardest part was still to come. I had to get Jessica or Mark to confess their intentions. I had to record them. David had given me a small recording device, a discreet gadget I could carry in my pocket. The next time they came to visit, I would be ready. I would have proof. Proof they couldn't deny. On Sunday, Jessica called me. Mom, I am coming to see you tomorrow. We need to finish settling the residence thing. We have waited too long already. The tone of her voice had changed. It was no longer sweet. It was firm, almost threatening. Okay, sweetie, I replied calmly. I will wait for you. I hung up and took a deep breath. Tomorrow would be the day. Tomorrow I would get the evidence I needed. That night I prepared everything. I checked that the recording device worked correctly. I practiced how to turn it on without it being noticed. I put it in the pocket of my green cardigan, the one I always wear. I made coffee. I set out mugs. Everything had to look normal. Everything had to look like any other visit. But inside, I knew nothing would ever be normal again. That this was the last time I would welcome Jessica as my daughter. After tomorrow, she would be the woman who tried to rob me. The woman who forged my signature. The woman who wanted to lock me up to keep what was mine. I sat on my bed and looked at the photographs on my nightstand. There was one of Jessica when she was 5. She was smiling, missing 2 baby teeth, hugging a stuffed animal. She looked so innocent, so pure, so full of love. When did she change? At what moment did that sweet little girl turn into this woman capable of doing so much harm to her own mother? Maybe she was always like this and I didn't want to see it. Maybe the money just brought to light what was always there. I put the photograph in a drawer. I didn't want to see it in the morning. I didn't want it to make me hesitate. I didn't want the memory of that child to stop me from doing what I had to do. I turned off the light. I closed my eyes, and I waited for dawn to arrive. The dawn of the day everything would change. The day I would stop being the victim and become something else. A woman who fights. A woman who defends herself. A woman who doesn't give up, even if that meant losing my daughter forever. Monday dawned gray. Heavy clouds covered the sky as if they knew what was coming. I got up early, at 6 in the morning. I showered. I dressed in my green cardigan where I had the recording device hidden. I ate breakfast without hunger, just a bit of toast and tea. My stomach was knotted with nerves. I checked 3 times that the device was working. I turned it on, said a few test words, turned it off. Everything worked perfectly. Jessica arrived at 10 on the dot. She came with Mark. The two of them entered my house with serious expressions. There were no more fake smiles, no more feigned sweetness. Jessica brought the gray folder again. Mark carried a black briefcase. They sat across from me in the living room. I discreetly turned on the recorder in my pocket. "Mom," Jessica started bluntly, "this is taking too long. We need you to sign the papers today. We already made the reservation at Serenity Meadows. We already paid the deposit. Everything is ready. We are just waiting on you." "You paid the deposit?" I asked. "With what money?" Jessica and Mark looked at each other. Mark spoke. "Look, Eleanor, we fronted the money. $5,000. But obviously, you are going to reimburse us when you sign everything. It is part of the process." I felt the rage rise in my chest, but I stayed calm. I needed them to keep talking. I needed them to incriminate themselves. "And if I don't want to go to Serenity Meadows," I asked softly, "what happens to those $5,000? Jessica sighed impatiently. "Mom, we already talked about this. It is the best thing for you. You can't live alone anymore. Look at this place. It is neglected. You are neglected. You need professional help. And we can't keep worrying about you all the time anymore. We have our own lives, our own problems." "Ah," I said. "So this is for you, not for me." Mark intervened with an irritated tone. "Don't start with that. We are doing this for everyone. You will be better taken care of, and we will have peace of mind." Jessica opened the folder and took out the same papers as before, plus some new ones. "Mom, here is the Serenity Meadows contract. Here is the authorization to sell the house. And this," she showed a new document. "This is a full power of attorney. With this, we will be able to manage all your accounts, all your finances, everything. It will be easier for everyone." I stared at her. "You already have a power of attorney in my name," I said. "One that I never signed." The silence that followed was absolute. Jessica went pale. Mark stopped breathing for a second. "What?" Jessica whispered. "How do you know that?" I leaned back into the sofa cushions, maintaining my calm even though inside my heart was pounding. "I know a lot of things, Jessica. I know you forged my signature. I know you filed an illegal document. I know you plan to keep my house and my money. I know everything." Mark stood up abruptly. "That is a lie. Who is putting ideas in your head? It was that busybody Barbara, wasn't it?" Jessica stood up too. "Mom, I don't know what they told you, but you are confused. You are misinterpreting everything. We would never do something like that. We are your family." "I am not confused," I replied firmly. "I have proof. I have the fake document. I have witnesses. And I have a lawyer." Mark started pacing back and forth, running his hands through his hair. "This is a disaster," he muttered. "A total disaster. Jessica, this is your fault. I told you to wait. I told you to be more careful." Jessica looked at him with fury. "My fault? You were the one with the brilliant idea to forge the signature. You were the one who said no one would notice. And there it was. The confession. Both admitting it, both blaming each other." I stayed seated, listening, while the recorder in my pocket captured every word. Mark pointed a finger at Jessica. "I just wanted the money to pay our debts. You were the one who said your mom was already old, that she didn't need that much, that it would be easy to convince her." Jessica screamed. "Don't blame May. We were both in agreement. We both needed that money. I watched them argue like two strangers, like two criminals fighting over their loot, and in that moment, all the love I once felt for Jessica evaporated. It turned into something cold, into something hard, into acceptance. Acceptance that my daughter wasn't who I thought she was. Acceptance that I had lost my little girl a long time ago. Maybe I never really had her. Enough, I said with a loud voice. They both fell silent and looked at me. I want you to get out of my house. Now. And never come back. Jessica took a step toward me. Mom, we can fix this. We can talk. There is nothing to fix, I replied. You forged my signature. You tried to rob me. You tried to lock me up. That isn't fixed with words. That is fixed with justice. Mark let out a bitter laugh. Justice? You aren't going to go to the police. You aren't going to report your own daughter. You don't have the guts. I stood up. My legs were trembling, but I stood firm. I already went to the police. I already filed the report. Everything is already in the authorities' hands, and I have this conversation recorded. So yes, Mark, I did have the guts. Mark's face crumbled. You recorded us? You manipulative old woman. Jessica started to cry. Mom, how could you? How could you do this to us? We are your family. How could you? I replied. How could you betray me like this? You stopped being my family the day you decided to rob me. Mark grabbed Jessica by the arm. Let's go. This is hopeless. We will see you in court. And just so you know, lady, we are going to fight. We are going to say you are senile, that you don't know what you are doing, that you need a legal guardian. We will fight to the end. Do it, I said with a calm I didn't know I possessed. Fight all you want. I have the truth on my side, and the truth always wins. They left, slamming the door. The noise resonated through the whole house. I stood in the middle of the living room, shaking, tears running down my cheeks. But they weren't tears of defeat. They were tears of liberation. I had just confronted my daughter. I had just stood my ground. I had just defended what was mine. And even though it hurt, even though my heart was breaking into pieces, I knew I had done the right thing. I sat on the sofa and took out the recording device. I turned it off. I held it in my hands as if it were a treasure. Because it was. It was the proof. It was my salvation. It was my weapon. I called David. I told him what had happened. I told him I had the recording. He asked me to come to his office immediately. I grabbed my purse, put away the recorder, locked the house, and left. The sky was still gray, but I felt something different. I felt that for the first time in a long time, I had control. I was in command of my own life, and no one, not even my own daughter, was going to take it from me. In David's office, we played the recording 3 times. He took meticulous notes, marking the exact minutes where Jessica and Mark admitted to forging my signature, where they argued about their debts, where they revealed their true intentions. This is pure gold, David said. With this, Eleanor, we can not only defend ourselves, we can counterattack. They are going to face criminal charges, forgery, attempted fraud, elder abuse. This is very serious. He explained the next steps. First, we would present the recording to the district attorney along with the forged document. Second, we would request a restraining order, so Jessica and Mark couldn't get near me or my property. Third, we would initiate a civil lawsuit for damages. And fourth, we would ensure the fake power of attorney was officially annulled and wiped from all records. Eleanor, he told me, looking me in the eye, this is going to be hard. They are going to try to discredit you. They are going to say you are confused, that you have memory problems. They are going to fight dirty. Are you ready for that? I nodded. I am ready. I have nothing left to lose. David, I already lost my daughter. Now I only have my dignity left, and that I will defend to the end. He smiled with respect. That is the right attitude. We are going to win this. The following days were a whirlwind. David presented all the documents to the DA's office. A prosecutor named Matthew Cole took the case. He was a man in his 40s, serious, deep voice. He asked me many questions. He wanted to make sure my testimony was solid, that my mind was clear. that I completely understood what I was doing. I answered every question firmly. I showed him I remembered exact dates, full names, precise details. I explained my daily routine, my activities, my responsibilities. I demonstrated that I was a woman perfectly capable of managing her own life. District Attorney Cole was satisfied. "Eleanor," he told me at the end, "you have a very strong case. We are going to proceed with charges. Jessica Miller and Mark are going to be summoned to testify. And I warn you, they will probably hire a lawyer who will try to negotiate. But with this evidence, they have very few options." 3 days later, Jessica and Mark received the official notifications. Summons to appear before the district attorney. Charges for document forgery and fraud. Temporary restraining order. Barbara told me that Jessica had gone to her house crying, looking for support. But Barbara confronted her. She told her that what she had done was unforgivable, that I had been an exemplary mother, and that she had betrayed me in the worst way. Jessica left furious, screaming that everyone was filling my head with lies, that I was an ungrateful old woman. That same night, Jessica tried to call me. 20 times, 30 times. She left voicemails. At first, pleading. "Mom, please, pick up. We need to talk. This got out of control. We can fix it. Don't involve the police. Think about the family. Think about what people will say." But I didn't answer. Every call I rejected made me stronger. Every message I deleted without listening gave me back a piece of my power. Then the messages changed tone. They became threatening. "You are going to regret this. You are going to end up alone. No one is going to want to take care of you when you are a crippled old woman. You are going to die alone in that house, and no one is going to cry for you." I recorded those messages too. I showed them to David. He added them to the file. "This only makes their situation worse," he said. "They are digging their own grave." The restraining order was temporary. With these threatening messages, I am going to request that it be permanent. A week later, the official summons arrived. Jessica and Mark had to appear before Prosecutor Cole. I was also cited as the victim and main witness. The day of the hearing, Barbara accompanied me. I put on my best clothes, a brown pantsuit I saved for special occasions. I did my hair carefully. I wanted to look dignified. I wanted to look strong. When we arrived at the courthouse, Jessica and Mark were already there, with their lawyer, a man in a dark suit, with the face of a shark. Jessica saw me and ran toward me. The security guard stopped her. "There is a restraining order, ma'am. You cannot approach." Jessica screamed from the distance. "Mom, please. You are my mother. How can you do this to me?" I looked her in the eye. I didn't feel pain anymore. I didn't feel love anymore. I only felt emptiness. "You decided to do this to yourself." "Jessica, I am only defending what is mine." She collapsed, crying. Mark held her, but he looked at me with pure hate, a hate that I returned with indifference. The hearing was long. Prosecutor Cole presented all the evidence: the forged document, the audio recording, the threatening messages, bank records showing Jessica and Mark had huge debts, more than $40,000 in credit cards and loans. Their lawyer tried to argue that I had misinterpreted my daughter's intentions, that it had all been a misunderstanding, that they only wanted to help me. But when they played the recording in the room, where Jessica and Mark clearly admitted to the forgery, the lawyer had nothing else to say. The prosecutor ruled that there was enough evidence to proceed with a formal trial. The charges stood. The restraining order was made permanent. Jessica and Mark could not get near me or within 200 yards of my house. They could not call me, write to me, or attempt any contact. If they did, they faced immediate arrest. Furthermore, the forged power of attorney was officially annulled. Any document Jessica had tried to process with that power was invalid. I walked out of that hearing with my head held high. Barbara hugged me in the parking lot. "You did it. Eleanor, I am so proud of you." I felt proud too, but I also felt a deep tiredness, an exhaustion that went beyond the physical. It was the exhaustion of having lost a daughter, of having discovered that the love I thought was unconditional had a price. $60,000. That was the price of my value to Jessica. That night, in my empty and silent house, I sat down to write. I took out an old notebook I had saved and started writing everything down. From the beginning. From the day I received the inheritance until this moment, I wrote about my pain, about my rage, about my disappointment. But I also wrote about my strength, about the courage I found when I thought I had none left, about the people who helped me when I needed it most. Barbara, David, Matthew Cole. Strangers who became allies. I wrote until my hands hurt, until tears stained the pages. I wrote until the words became catharsis. And when I finished, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time. I felt peace. Not complete peace, because the wound was still fresh, but enough peace to know that I had done the right thing, that I hadn't let myself be defeated, that I had fought and was winning. The next day, David called me with news. Jessica and Mark's lawyer want to negotiate. They are willing to plead guilty to lesser charges if we drop the major charges. They want to avoid jail time. What do you recommend? I asked him. He sighed. It depends on what you want, Eleanor. If you want full justice, we move forward with the trial and seek the maximum sentence. But that means more months of legal process, more hearings, more stress. If you accept the plea deal, they admit their guilt, end up with a criminal record, pay a fine, and you can close this chapter faster. I thought for a long time before answering. What did I really want? Revenge? No. Justice? Yes. But I also wanted peace. I wanted to close this door and start rebuilding my life. I accept the deal, I said finally. But on one condition. I want them to publicly admit what they did. I want it officially on the record that they tried to defraud me. I want their names marked, so people know who they really are. David smiled on the other end of the phone. I can get that. Leave it to me. A week later, Jessica and Mark signed the guilty plea. They admitted to forging my signature. They admitted attempting to appropriate my assets through deception. They were sentenced to probation, community service, and a fine of $10,000 they had to pay me as restitution. Their names were entered into the judicial system. Anyone who looked up their background would find these charges. And most importantly, the permanent restraining order remained. They could never approach me again. The months that followed were of silent transformation. News of the case leaked into the neighborhood. Not because I told it, but because these things are always known. People talk, neighbors ask. And soon everyone knew that Jessica and Mark had tried to rob me and that I had reported them. The reactions were varied. Some admired me. They told me I had been very brave. Others looked at me with pity, as if reporting my own daughter was something I should be ashamed of. But I didn't care what people thought anymore. I had discovered something fundamental during this whole process. I had discovered that my worth didn't depend on what others thought of me. It didn't even depend on what my daughter thought of me. My worth was in myself, in my ability to get up every morning, in my strength to defend what was just, in my decision not to be a victim. Barbara visited me every week. We talked about everything except the trial. We talked about our lives, our postponed dreams, the things we wanted to do before we got too old. One day, Barbara told me something that changed my perspective. Eleanor, you are 68. Statistically, you could live 20 more years. Maybe more. That is a lot of time. Too much time to spend locked in this house, reliving what happened. You need to do something new. You need to live. She was right. I had spent the last few months consumed by the legal process, by the pain of betrayal, by the loss of Jessica. But now that everything was over, what did I have left? An empty house, bitter memories, and $60,000 that remained intact in my bank account. Money that Jessica could never touch. Money that was mine. Completely mine. To do whatever I wanted, I started making lists. Things I always wanted to do but never could. Travel to the ocean. Learn to drive. Take classes in something. Anything. Buy new clothes. Go to the theater. Eat in fancy restaurants. Simple things for others, but for me, they represented freedom. They represented life. They represented that there was still time. There were still possibilities. The first thing I did was enroll in a driving school. The instructor was named Sarah. She was a woman in her 50s, patient and kind. When I told her my age, she smiled. It is never too late to learn, Eleanor. I have had students up to 80 years old. You are still a spring chicken." Her words made me laugh. It had been so long since I laughed for real. The first classes were terrifying. I stalled the car constantly. I confused the gas with the brake. Sarah had to grab the wheel when I got distracted. But little by little I improved. I learned to feel the car, to trust my reflexes, not to be afraid. After 2 months of practice, I took the test, and I passed. At 68 years old, I got my driver's license. The day I received the license, I cried. But not from sadness, from joy, from pride. Barbara was with me and hugged me tight. "You did it," she told me. "Now you are unstoppable." I bought a used car. Nothing fancy. A small silver sedan, economical and reliable. The first time I drove it alone, my hands were shaking. But when I got out onto the street, when I felt the steering wheel in my hands and the freedom of being able to go wherever I wanted without depending on anyone, I knew I had made the right decision. I drove to the ocean. It was something I had dreamed of doing my whole life. It took me 4 hours to get there. I stopped several times along the way to rest, to get coffee, to make sure I was doing okay. But I arrived, and when I saw the ocean for the first time in my life, I was speechless. It was bigger than I imagined, more beautiful, more powerful. I took off my shoes and walked on the sand. The cold water touched my feet, and I felt alive, completely alive. Meanwhile, I heard through neighbors' gossip what was happening with Jessica and Mark. Their marriage was crumbling. Mark blamed Jessica for everything. He said she had convinced him to participate in the fraud. Jessica blamed him. She said everything had been Mark's idea. The truth was that both were equally guilty, and now both were paying the consequences. Mark lost his job. His employer found out about the criminal charges and fired him. Jessica had to leave the small baking business she had because no one wanted to buy from someone with a fraud record. They had to sell their house to pay the debts. They moved into a small apartment in a rough neighborhood, and according to rumors, they were in the process of getting a divorce. Part of me felt pity. Part of me still remembered the little girl Jessica was. But the greater part of me knew this was justice. Not revenge. Justice. They made decisions. They planned to rob me. They forged documents. They threatened to declare me incompetent. And now they faced the natural consequences of their actions. I hadn't done anything to them. They had done it to themselves. One day, 6 months after the trial, I received a letter. It had no return address, but I recognized the handwriting. It was from Jessica. I opened it with trembling hands. It said simply this: "Mom, I know I don't deserve your forgiveness. I know what I did was unforgivable. I have no excuses. I just want you to know that I am sorry, that I regret it every day, that I have lost everything, including the most important thing, you. I don't expect you to reply. I just needed to tell you this. Your daughter who failed you." I read the letter 3 times. I searched for sincerity between the words. I looked for true remorse, and maybe it was there. Maybe Jessica really felt it now that she had lost everything. But it was too late. The damage was done. The trust was broken, and I had learned to live without her. I put the letter in a drawer. I didn't tear it up. I didn't throw it away. But I didn't answer it either. I moved on with my life. I signed up for painting classes. I discovered I had a talent for it. My paintings were simple, but they filled me with satisfaction. I painted the ocean I had seen. I painted my house. I painted my old hands holding flowers. Every painting was a form of healing, a way to express everything I had lived. I sold a few pieces at a local fair. People who didn't know me bought my paintings. They paid me for them, and although the money wasn't much, the fact that someone valued my work, my art, my expression, meant more than any amount. It meant that I still had something to offer the world, that my life hadn't ended, that I was just beginning a new stage. Barbara and I took a trip together. We went to the mountains. We stayed in a small cabin. We walked on trails surrounded by trees. We breathed fresh air. We talked about our lives, our mistakes, our hopes. And one night, sitting in front of a campfire, Barbara told me, "You know what I admire most about you, Eleanor? That you didn't become bitter, Many people in your place would have filled themselves with hate. But you chose to move forward. You chose to live. That is true strength. Her words touched me deeply. Because she was right. I could have stayed stuck in resentment. I could have let Jessica's betrayal consume me. But I chose differently. I chose to rebuild myself. I chose to forgive myself for having been naive. I chose to let go of what I couldn't change and embrace what I could. It has been almost 2 years since that gray Thursday when I received the news of the $60,000. 2 years since I saw Mark's keys hit the floor. 2 years since I discovered my own daughter was capable of betraying me. But it has also been 2 years since I decided to defend myself. Since I found my voice. Since I learned it is never too late to start over. Today, I am 70. My hair is completely white now. The wrinkles on my face are deeper. My hands shake a little more than before. But my eyes shine in a way they didn't 2 years ago. Because now I know who I am. I know what I am capable of. I know I can survive the worst and come out stronger on the other side. I sold my house, that house full of memories that no longer served me. That house where I raised Jessica, where I lost my husband, where I felt lonelier than ever. I sold it for a good price and bought a smaller house in another neighborhood. A house with a garden, with big windows that let in the Sunday. A house that is mine and only mine. Without ghosts, without guilt. Just a new space for a new life. With the money from the sale and what was left of the inheritance, I was able to live peacefully, not luxuriously, but with dignity, without worrying about every dollar, without having to count pennies to buy food, and most importantly, without depending on anyone. I learned to enjoy my solitude. I learned that being alone isn't the same as being abandoned. Being alone can be a choice. It can be freedom. I continued with my painting classes. I improved so much that the teacher invited me to exhibit in a small gallery. My paintings hung for a month alongside those of other artists. I sold 5 pieces. The money didn't matter. What mattered was watching strangers stand in front of my paintings, observing them, connecting with them, seeing that my story, my pain, my rebirth could touch others. One afternoon, while I was painting in my new garden, a young neighbor approached. Her name was Ashley, and she was about 30. She came accompanied by her grandmother, a woman my age who walked with a cane. "Eleanor," Ashley said, "my grandmother heard your story, and she wanted to meet you." Ashley's grandmother sat on my porch. She told me that her son had also tried to take her house, that he had threatened her, manipulated her, scared her, but she never dared to report him. She lived in constant fear. I took her hands. I told her it wasn't too late, that she could still defend herself. That help was available. I gave her David's number. I gave her Prosecutor Cole's number. I told her that if I could do it at 68, she could too. She cried in my arms. And 2 weeks later, she called to tell me she had filed a report, that for the first time in years, she slept peacefully. That experience made me realize something important. My story wasn't just mine. It was the story of thousands of older women who are abused, manipulated, robbed by their own relatives. Women who stay silent out of fear, out of shame, out of misunderstood love. And if I could help even one of them, my pain would have had meaning. I started attending a support group for seniors who are victims of family abuse. There I met many women with similar stories. Some worse. Sons who hit them. Grandchildren who stole from them. Families that abandoned them in nursing homes against their will. I listened to every story with respect. I shared mine, and together we supported each other. We reminded each other that we had value, that we deserved respect, that it was never too late to defend ourselves. One of those women, Ramona, became a close friend. She was 75 and had lost everything at the hands of her addicted son. But she was rebuilding herself. She worked part-time at a library. She lived in a small but clean apartment. And she smiled. Despite everything, she smiled. Her strength inspired me. It reminded me that pain doesn't have to be permanent, that we can choose to heal. I didn't hear from Jessica directly again, only rumors. That she had divorced Mark, that she worked cleaning houses, just like I did for 30 years, that she lived alone in that small apartment. Part of me wanted to know how she was. Part of me still remembered her as my little girl. But the greater part of me had made peace with her absence. I had accepted that she took her path and I took mine, and that those paths would no longer cross. One day, while driving my car down the highway toward the ocean, I stopped at a lookout point. I got out and stood before the landscape. The wind moved my white hair. The sun warmed my wrinkled face, and I felt at peace, completely at peace. I thought about everything I had lived, about all the times I fell and got up, about all the tears I shed, about all the battles I fought. And I realized I had won. I hadn't won money, or fame, or public recognition, but I had won something much more valuable. I had won my dignity. I had recovered my voice. I had learned to love myself after others stopped loving me. I had discovered that my worth didn't depend on being a mother, on being useful, on being needed. My worth was simply in existing, in being Eleanor, in being me. I went back to my car and kept driving. I arrived at the beach when the sun was starting to set. I sat on the sand and watched the sky paint itself orange, pink, purple, the colors I had never been able to appreciate before because I was always too busy surviving. But now I had time. Now I had peace. Now I had a life. I took out my notebook, the same one where I had written my whole story 2 years ago. I opened it to a blank page and started writing a letter. Not for Jessica, not for Mark, but for myself, for the woman I was, for the woman I am now. Dear Eleanor, I wrote. You survived. When you thought you couldn't, you did. When the world betrayed you, you found strength inside you. When your daughter abandoned you, you found yourself. It wasn't easy. It wasn't fast. But you did it. And now, at 70, you are living the life you always deserved. A life on your own terms. A life without fear. A life with freedom. I am proud of you. I am proud of us. I closed the notebook. Tears ran down my cheeks, but they were different tears. They weren't from pain. They were from gratitude. Gratitude for being alive, for having had the courage to fight, for having given myself a second chance. The sun finished hiding on the horizon. Stars began to appear in the dark sky. I stayed sitting there, on the sand, feeling the cool sea breeze on my skin, and I knew it had all been worth it. Every tear, every battle, every moment of loneliness, everything had brought me here, to this moment of absolute peace. I got up, shook the sand off my clothes, and walked back to my car. I drove home with a smile on my face. That night I slept deeply, without nightmares, without fears, just with the certainty that I had done the right thing, that I had defended myself, that I had chosen to live. And if you are listening to this story and you identify with it, if you too have been betrayed by someone you loved, if they have also made you feel like you are worthless, that you don't matter, that you are a burden, I want you to know something. You are not. You have value, you matter, and it is never, never too late to defend yourself, to recover your life, to be free. Don't allow anyone, not even your own family, to take away your dignity. Don't sign papers you don't understand. Don't hand over control of your life for fear of being alone, because being alone is better than being surrounded by people who use you. Chosen solitude is freedom. Forced abandonment is abuse. If you need help, seek it. There are lawyers, prosecutors, organizations that defend seniors. You are not alone. There are people like Barbara, like David, like Prosecutor Cole, who are willing to help you. You just have to dare to take the first step, to raise your voice, to say, this is not right, and I am going to defend myself. And if you already did it, if you already fought your battle and won, I congratulate you. I know how hard it was. I know how much pain it cost, but I also know how liberating it feels on the other side, when you realize you survived, that you are stronger than you thought, that your life still has value, purpose, beauty. Thank you for listening to my story. Thank you for accompanying me on this journey from betrayal to freedom. If this story touched you, if it helped you in any way, leave me a comment. Share your own story if you feel comfortable doing so. And like this video so more women like us can find this story and know they are not alone. Remember, it is never too late to start over. It is never too late to defend yourself. It is never too late to live. Your life is yours, and you deserve to live it with dignity, respect, and love. Mostly self-love, because that is the love no one can take from you. The love that will always be there, waiting for you to discover it. I am Eleanor. I am 70 years old, and my life is just beginning.